he conceived or had exposure to community foundations somewhere along the line, and called a group of us together. Were you part of that, Kurt?
No.
Sam Price, Charlie Price, and Sam and
Miles Last.
Yeah,
Sure.
half a dozen of us up to his office one day, and he explained a little bit about what the community foundation is and what it does, and would we have any interest in pursuing that concept. And so we got together a couple times and sort of kicked the idea around, and the more we heard about it, the more we liked it, because Jamestown, while it had a lot of foundation assets, I think a public foundation offered something that the private foundations didn't. And that's how it got started. And, you know, it was a great experience because they had a consultant. John had talked to a consulting firm.
Ken Strickler.
Yeah. How'd you remember that?
Well, I came in a little bit later, but I remember that whole study. Yeah.
And they said that if we could raise, was it $1 million in 5 years of assets, we would be able to sustain it, they thought. But they were rather doubtful as to whether we could do that or not. And so we set our hearts to do it, and were able to far exceed that in 5 years. And Francis Grow and some of the others that became involved.
Well, Betty Lene was at the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. And startup. Well, the concept was clear to me, and I think to most others, that if we could have a foundation that was totally public and objective in its decision making, and that would be in unrestricted funds, would have a lot of appeal in Jamestown. And gosh, here we are today, $60 million foundation, and turning about $4 or $5 million over to the community every year, and scholarships and individual gifts. And it's been a wonderful experience to see that happen and see what people could do if you want to do it. Francis Grow, do you remember him at all?
Absolutely, yeah.
He was a great influence in organizing and getting that put together and in a way that it would work, and kept his eye on it. And, fabulous guy. He always, I probably am being repetitive, but we would have lunch almost once a week, and became very good friends. And I've often thought about Fran and appreciated his friendship very much. But he always would ask the question of, we talk about the community and the business and the foundations and the assets, the dollars of assets. And he tracked the assets and said that our community has more dollars of assets in foundations than probably any community our size, meaning population,
Right.
in this part of the country. And then he would always end up with saying, well, if that's the case, why aren't we doing better?
Yeah.
You know, and we pondered that and tried to explore some ways that they could do better. Although, not to say that the foundations haven't done a lot. And when you think about it, Gabby, in recent years, took a different tack with the ice arena and did take a giant step into economic development. a lot of people don't agree with what they've done, but I think it's a great step forward to see some of these foundation dollars put to work in a positive way, economically way. I mean, much of the years went by, as you know, Greg, and they would get requests for a new typewriter. That was a common request that foundations would, First Presbyterian Church might need a new typewriter, so that would be a request to one of the foundations. And we felt that really that wasn't changing the style and the need of our community. But
well, I think one of the critical things was when Fran and you, and I was on the board at the time, made the decision to get a tax opinion, that finding a way in which private foundations could give to economic development. I don't know if you remember that, but it was a really big tipping point, because all the private foundations, we can't possibly do anything to assist in economic development. There had to be a way, and it was Fran and the Community Foundation said, let's get a tax opinion. Let's figure out how that could happen. And that was critical. Kind of lost in the shuffle, but that has opened the opportunities to do things like that.
Well, that really was a goal, because I always quote Betty Lene saying, when we started the public foundation, one of the big objectives was to have that freedom of giving. I don't know if that's the right term, but in other words, we would talk about medical care, and she would say, well, who knows what health care will be in 20 years. I mean, it may be all owned by the government and entirely furnished by the government. And if that was true, we would want to be able to deal with it and not just be restricted. Is that to address what you're thinking? Yeah, that is, as always, and as a matter of fact, continues to be a big concern of mine. It's hard still when people get right down to making a gift and deciding, I'm going to put an amount in my will that will go to the community foundation. And when that happens, it's a good decision. They think, let's give it totally unrestricted, so the board of directors at 20 years from now, they'll know what the community needs. But it's interesting. It doesn't seem to work that way. I mean, most people, when it gets right down to making a gift, they want to know what it's going to be used for, And I can understand that. Why do we live here? Once in a while, I say to people, well, you could live anywhere you want. I mean, anywhere in the country that you wish. Why are you here? And it is interesting to see. I think it's Chautauqua Lake, in our case, Lake Erie, and the Chautauqua Institution. But mainly, I just think it's the people and the quality of life and the ability to go play golf in 15 minutes and be on the golf course and not have it take 10 hours to just get there.